All right, so today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, as it's more commonly known. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it, but you might not really know what it is or even how it works. And that's exactly why we're here. We're going to unpack all of that, and we're going to be taking a look at this really insightful article. It's called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, ACT, Multicultural Counseling Service. And it was published just a few days ago on November 24th, 2024, by the Multicultural Counseling Service. And this article is great because it really digs into how ACT can help you live a more fulfilling life, even when you're dealing with all those difficult emotions that life throws at us. And that's what I find so interesting about this whole approach. It's not about feeling good all the time. Because let's be honest, that's just not realistic. It's more about learning how to thrive even when things are tough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. ACT is really all about building what they call psychological flexibility. And the article describes this as the ability to navigate all of life's ups and downs, but while staying true to yourself and what matters most to you. So you can kind of think of it like a mental toolkit for weathering those inevitable storms.
Okay, so it's not about erasing or ignoring those difficult emotions. It's more about learning to coexist with them. Because I think a lot of us, we try to just avoid those uncomfortable feelings. But ACT seems to be suggesting a different approach.
Exactly. It's about making space for those feelings,
Yeah.
accepting that they're part of the human experience, and then figuring out how to move forward in a way that aligns with your values.
Okay, that makes sense. So the article breaks down ACT into 6 core processes. It's kind of like the key ingredients in this recipe for psychological flexibility. But I'll be honest, when I first saw that list of 6, I was a bit overwhelmed. I was like, how am I going to wrap my head around all of this? But as I was reading through the article, I realized that these processes are all interconnected. They work together to create this shift in how you relate to your thoughts and feelings, and ultimately your actions.
Yeah, it's really like a dance. Each process plays a unique role, but it's the synergy between them that kind of creates the magic.
I like that analogy. So where do we even begin with these 6 processes? Maybe we could start with acceptance and cognitive diffusion. They seem to kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So imagine you're dealing with a wave of anxiety. Maybe you have a big presentation at work. Now, instead of trying to push that anxiety away, which can actually make it stronger, acceptance says, okay, this anxiety is here. I'm going to acknowledge it, but I'm not going to judge it.
Yeah. So it's more about creating space for that feeling rather than fighting it. And I can see how that would be a relief because sometimes that internal struggle just adds another layer of stress on top of everything else.
Right, and that's where cognitive diffusion comes in. You know how we can get caught up in those negative thought spirals like, I'm going to mess this up. Everyone will think I'm incompetent. My career is over.
Oh, tell me about it.
Oh.
I've been down that rabbit hole more times than I can count.
Well, cognitive diffusion helps you step back from those thoughts and see them for what they are. Just thoughts, not facts. The article gives this fun example. Imagine taking that thought, I'm going to mess this up, and singing it in a silly opera voice.
Okay, that sounds a little wacky.
Yeah.
But I can see how it would help you take yourself less seriously. It's like you're saying, okay, this thought is here, but I don't have to buy into it.
Precisely. You're basically diffusing the thought's power by changing your relationship to it. You're not trying to get rid of it, but you're also not letting it run the show.
This is starting to click for me. So we've got acceptance making space for those difficult feelings, and cognitive diffusion helping us detach from those unhelpful thoughts. What's next in this dance of psychological flexibility?
Well, let's talk about being present, which is all about bringing your attention to the here and now.
Okay, this reminds me of mindfulness, which I've dabbled in, but sometimes I struggle to make it a consistent practice.
Yeah, it's something we all struggle with. Our minds are constantly jumping ahead, dwelling on the past. We're getting lost in distractions. But the ability to be present, that's really crucial for navigating challenging situations. So the article uses the example of a stressful meeting. Now, instead of getting swept away by anxiety about what you're going to say, you could focus on your breath or the feeling of your feet on the ground.
Oh, yeah. It's like hitting the pause button on all that mental chatter.
Yeah.
And just grounding yourself in the present moment. I noticed that even taking a few deep breaths can really help to calm my nerves.
Absolutely. And it's not about emptying your mind completely. It's more about recognizing when your mind has drifted off and gently guiding your attention back to the present.
This is making me think about how I often operate on autopilot, just going through the motions without really being present in my own life.
Yeah, that's a common experience. But the more we can cultivate this ability to be present, the more we can savor the good moments and navigate the tough ones with more clarity and awareness.
All right, so acceptance, cognitive diffusion, and being present. We've covered 3 of the 6 core processes of ACT. and I'm starting to see how they fit together. But I'm curious to learn about the other three. What's next on our list?
Well, the next one is a little more abstract, but it's equally important. It's called self as context. And it's about recognizing that you are more than your thoughts and feelings.
Okay, that definitely sounds abstract. How do we wrap our heads around that?
Well, the article offers this beautiful analogy. Imagine you are the vast open sky. Your thoughts and feelings are like the weather. Sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, sometimes chaotic. But the sky, your true self, remains unchanged.
I love that. So even when you're going through tough times, there's a part of you that remains constant and grounded. I think that's really reassuring because sometimes it feels like we're just at the mercy of our emotions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you are not your thoughts or your feelings. You are the context in which those thoughts and feelings arise, and that context, that true self, that's always there, even when it feels hidden behind the clouds.
I was going through a rough patch recently, and thinking of myself as the sky actually helped me weather the storm. It gave me a sense of perspective, like, okay, this is tough right now,
Mm.
but it's not the whole story of who I am.
That's a great example of how this concept can be applied in real life. And that's what we're aiming for with ACT. To take these seemingly abstract ideas and turn them into practical tools for living a richer, more fulfilling life.
So far, we've explored acceptance, cognitive diffusion being present, and self as context. I'm starting to see how these processes can help us create more space for difficult emotions, detach from unhelpful thoughts, ground ourselves in the present moment, while remembering that we are more than our transient experiences. But what about actually taking action? How does ACT bridge that gap between acceptance and moving forward in a way that aligns with our values?
Well, that's where the remaining two processes come into play: values and committed action.
All right, let's unpack those next. Values seem like a pretty big deal in ACT. How does the article explain this concept?
Well, the article really emphasizes how identifying your core values can act as a compass, guiding your actions and decisions. It's about figuring out what truly matters to you, what kind of person you want to be, and what kind of life you want to create.
So it's about moving beyond just reacting to circumstances
Hmm.
and making conscious choices that are aligned with your deepest values.
Exactly. For example, if you value family connection, you might prioritize spending quality time with your loved ones, even if it means turning down extra work hours or saying no to social commitments that drain your energy.
That makes a lot of sense. But sometimes it's hard to know what our values really are. It's easy to get caught up in what we think we should value or what society tells us is important. So how do we get to the heart of what truly matters to us?
That's a great question, and it's something that often takes some exploration and reflection. The article suggests a few helpful exercises. One is to imagine yourself at the end of your life looking back. What do you want to be remembered for? What kind of impact do you want to have made on the world?
Wow, that's a powerful exercise. It really puts things into perspective.
Another approach is to think about people you admire. What qualities do they embody that resonate with you? Those qualities might be clues to your own values.
I'm already starting to brainstorm a list of people I admire and the values they represent. This gave me a lot to think about.
It's a journey, not a destination. And the more we clarify our values, the more we can use them as guiding principles in our lives.
Okay, so we've identified our values, this compass that points us in the right direction. But how do we actually take action? That's where committed action comes in, right?
Exactly. This is where we translate those values into concrete actions, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable.
So it's not just about thinking about our values, it's about putting them into practice in our daily lives.
Precisely. The article gives the example of someone who's terrified of public speaking, but they really value professional growth. So they might start by speaking up more in team meetings, even if it feels scary at first.
I can relate to that. I used to be terrified of public speaking, but I knew that if I wanted to advance in my career, I needed to face that fear. And it was definitely uncomfortable at first,
Yeah.
but the more I did it, the easier it became.
That's a great example of committed action in action. It's about taking those small, consistent steps towards your goals, even when faced with fear or discomfort.
So it's not about waiting until we feel confident or ready. It's about taking action, even when we're still a bit shaky.
Exactly. Because often it's through taking action that we build confidence and develop new skills.
This all makes so much sense. We've covered all 6 core processes of ACT now, and I'm starting to see how they work together to create this powerful framework for living a more fulfilling life.
Mhm.
We've talked about acceptance, cognitive diffusion being present, self as context values, and committed action. It's like each process builds upon the previous one, creating this upward spiral of growth and well-being.
You've captured it perfectly. It's not about mastering each process in isolation. It's about weaving them together into a tapestry that reflects your unique values and aspirations.
But this is all still theoretical, right?
Yeah.
Does ACT actually work in practice? How do we know that these principles translate into real-world results?
That's a great question, and it's one that the article addresses in some depth, and it's what we'll delve into next. Yeah, so you're right to ask, does this stuff actually work? Luckily, it's not just, a bunch of feel-good ideas. There's actual research backing it up, and that's what makes it so compelling to me.
Yeah, I love that about these deep dives.
Yeah.
Getting into the why behind the what. So what kind of research are we talking about here?
Well, the article points to this significant meta-analysis from 2015 by Ajak and others. And a meta-analysis is really valuable because it combines results from a bunch of different studies, so it kind of gives us a clearer picture. And in this case, they looked at 39 randomized controlled trials, which is really the gold standard for this type of research.
Okay, so we're not talking about anecdotal evidence here.
Yeah.
This is rigorous scientific research.
Exactly. And the findings were pretty impressive. They found that ACT was significantly effective for a whole range of issues, not just the, extreme cases you might think of. We're talking about anxiety, depression, and even chronic pain.
So this isn't just for people who are dealing with severe mental health challenges. Could ACT be beneficial for anyone looking to improve their overall well-being?
Absolutely. I think ACT can be a really valuable tool for anyone who wants to build resilience and, develop a more flexible approach to life's inevitable challenges. It's really about learning to thrive amidst the ups and downs, rather than getting stuck in patterns of avoidance or struggle.
The article also highlights a specific study on chronic pain, right? That seems like a really interesting application of ACT.
It is. So this study by Vowles and colleagues in 2014, they found that ACT interventions actually led to increased activity levels in people with chronic pain.
That's amazing. So it's not just about feeling better emotionally, it's about improving your ability to function in your daily life.
Right. And not only that, the study also found that ACT helped reduce distress related to pain and even improved people's adherence to their treatment plans. So it seems like ACT can really have this ripple effect, positively impacting various aspects of a person's life.
Okay, so we've got the theory, the research. But I'm always curious about the human side of things. Does the article offer any personal stories or testimonials about how ACT has impacted people's lives?
It does. And this is where it gets really interesting because the article shares some quotes from actual ACT participants. And one that really struck me was from Mark, who used to struggle with generalized anxiety. He said, ACT helped me realize I don't need to fight my thoughts. I can have anxiety and still live the life I want.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. It's not about eliminating anxiety altogether, which is often an unrealistic goal, but it's learning to coexist with it
Yeah,
and not let it dictate your choices.
exactly. It's about accepting that anxiety might be part of the ride, but it doesn't have to be in the driver's seat.
And there's another quote from Tina, a chronic pain survivor. That really resonated with me. She said, "My pain doesn't define me anymore. I'm back to doing things I love, even if it's harder some days."
That's so powerful. That quote really speaks to the transformative power of ACT, even in the face of chronic pain. Tina was able to reclaim her life and find joy in the things that matter most to her. And that shift didn't come from eliminating the pain, but from changing her relationship to it.
These stories are so inspiring. They really show that ACT isn't just some abstract concept. It can have a real and profound impact on people's lives.
What's so striking is that both Mark and Tina talk about not letting their challenges define them, and that seems to be a core theme that runs through ACT. It's about reclaiming your agency and living a life that aligns with your values, even when faced with, difficult circumstances.
Okay, so we've got compelling research, inspiring testimonials. I'm sold. I'm
Hmm.
so curious about the underlying mechanism. What is it about ACT that seems to work so well? What's the secret sauce?
Well, the article sums it up beautifully with this quote. It's not about fixing myself, it's about living better.
I love that. It's that shift from focusing on feeling good to focusing on living well.
Exactly. ACT acknowledges that life is inherently messy. There will always be challenges, discomfort, and difficult emotions. It's not about erasing those things, but learning to navigate them in a way that allows you to live a meaningful, values-driven life.
So it's about accepting that discomfort is part of the human experience
Hmm.
and figuring out how to live well despite those challenges. That's a much more empowering perspective than trying to achieve some unattainable state of constant happiness.
It is, and a big part of that is aligning your actions with your values. You know when you're living in accordance with what truly matters to you. It brings a sense of purpose and direction, even amidst the storms.
All of this is making me think about how I handle conflict in my own life. I tend to avoid it like the plague. But maybe AZT could help me approach those difficult conversations differently. Instead of trying to shut down my emotions, maybe I could practice acceptance, get curious about my thoughts, and focus on communicating my needs in a way that aligns with my values.
That's a fantastic application of ACT principles, and it highlights how these concepts can be applied to various aspects of our lives, not just mental health.
So for our listeners who are now super intrigued by ACT and want to explore it further, what are some practical steps they can take?
Well, the article suggests a few great options. First, if you're ready to dive in headfirst, seeking out a therapist trained in ACT can be a game changer. They can provide personalized guidance and support as you learn to apply these principles in your own life.
And for those who might want to dip their toes in before taking the therapy plunge.
There are some excellent self-help resources available. The article specifically mentions ACT Made Simple by Russ Harris. It's a great starting point for understanding the core concepts of ACT. And experimenting with some of the techniques.
I've heard great things about that book. It's supposed to be really accessible and practical.
It is. And even something as simple as practicing basic mindfulness techniques can be a great entry point into the world of ACT. There are tons of apps and online resources available, and even just taking a few minutes each day to focus on your breath or tune into your senses can make a big difference.
You know what strikes me about ACT is that it's not just a set of techniques or strategies. It's really about cultivating a different way of being in the world. It's about shifting your perspective, showing up with more awareness and acceptance,
Hmm.
and taking action in a way that aligns with your deepest values.
That's a beautiful way to put it. ACT is less about fixing yourself and more about embracing the fullness of your human experience with all its complexities and contradictions.
So it's not a quick fix, but a journey of self-discovery and growth.
Exactly. And the beauty of ACT is that it's a journey you don't have to take alone. There are resources, support systems, and a whole community of people who've embraced this approach and found it to be truly transformative.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think that even if someone isn't ready to, jump into therapy,
Yeah.
they can still incorporate these ACT principles into their lives.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much you can do on your own. Like we were talking about before, even just practicing mindfulness for a few minutes each day can be a great way to start cultivating that sense of presence and non-judgmental awareness.
hmm And what about those times when you're really stuck in a negative thought spiral?
Hmm.
Any tips for applying cognitive diffusion in those moments?
Oh, definitely. One technique that I find really helpful is to just label the thought. So instead of getting caught up in the content of it, you can just say to yourself, oh, there's that thought about not being good enough. You're just acknowledging it as a thought rather than a fact. And that can create some distance and loosen its grip.
That's a great tip. Like you're taking the power away from the thought by observing it rather than identifying with it.
Exactly. And, ACT emphasizes the importance of values-driven action. So once you've created some space for those difficult emotions and detached from those unhelpful thoughts, you can start asking yourself, what matters most to me? What kind of life do I want to create?
It's about aligning your actions with your values, even
Yep.
if it's just, one small step in the right direction.
Precisely. And those small steps can really add up to big changes over time.
As we've been diving deep into this article, I've been really struck by how ACT can be applied to so many different areas of life, not just mental health.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's really a framework for navigating challenges and living a more meaningful life, period.
Like think about relationships, for example. Could ACT principles help you communicate more effectively, set healthier boundaries, or even navigate conflict in a more constructive way?
Absolutely. Imagine approaching those difficult conversations with more acceptance and curiosity, rather than defensiveness or blame, or using your values as a guide when you're making decisions about your relationships.
It's about showing up with more awareness, intention,
Hmm.
and flexibility.
Exactly. And the same principles can be applied in the workplace. Imagine approaching a stressful project with a sense of acceptance and focusing on the values that drive your work, or using cognitive diffusion to detach from those self-critical thoughts. That can sometimes sabotage your performance.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless.
It's all about bringing that ACT mindset,
Yeah.
acceptance, mindfulness, values-driven action into every aspect of your life.
Well, dear listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into acceptance and commitment therapy. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty energized and inspired.
Me too. It's been a fascinating exploration.
So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you to ponder. Could ACT be the key to unlocking a more authentic, fulfilling life for you? A life where you embrace your challenges, live in alignment with your values, and create a legacy that truly reflects who you are? The answer, my friends, is within you.
Go forth and explore.